It was a cold day in Northgate. Bren knew there were worse things than being cold, of course, like the ache in his side from being kicked by one of the hold guards passing by him on the street, not to mention the hunger. Gods, that was enough to keep him from focusing on just how cold he actually was. He sat just inside the mouth of an alley that split off from one of the main streets in the city. It had been a few days now since he arrived. Cold, beaten, starving. It was a miracle he was still alive. A city vagabond had taken pity on him shortly after his arrival, sharing his food and blankets with Bren. Diniv was his name, though that took Bren quite some time to get out of him. A short fellow, with messy brown hair and an unkempt beard that ran down to his collarbone. Diniv put on a beaten and pessimistic personality, though underneath he was a kinder man than Bren deserved. Diniv must have noticed Bren shaking, his teeth chattering from the cold, for he scooted over from the pile of junk he accrued and proffered his blanket to Bren.
Here, take this, lad.
Bren gave him a quiet stare for a few moments before saying,
No, you should keep it. I've taken plenty from you already.
Diniv ignored him and placed the blanket over Bren's shoulders.
I'm a Svelson, I can handle the cold.
A Svelson? What in Thrida's name was a demigod doing as a beggar?
Bren took a moment to ponder this, before eventually replying,
Thank you. You, never told me you were a son of Svel, Diniv.
It's not as fanciful as it seems, lad.
Diniv replied, his expression growing distant.
You have to do a lot to garnish the attention of my father. Any of them, really. Can't say I'd be surprised if he didn't even know I existed.
The vagabond continued to stare out over the street, lost in thought. Bren contemplated this for a little while, uncertain what to say. Eventually, he changed the subject.
Thank you for all you've done for me, Diniv. You're a good man. You don't deserve to be crawling around in alleys with people like me.
Diniv raised an eyebrow, turning from the main street.
People like you?
I've done a lot of bad things. A lot of things I'm not proud of. I'm not a good person, and you really shouldn't be helping me. If you'd known some of the things I've done...
Bren trailed off, letting the words sit heavy for a few moments. Eventually, Diniv settled back down on the other side of the alley, eyeing Bren.
You never did tell me how you got here.
And I don't think I can. The wounds are still too fresh.
Bren replied, the memories of the last few weeks flashing in his mind. The first encounter with his sister in years, their flight from North Hawk after watching her and her friends' evisceration of the Shatterclaw forces there. The bloodbath at Bleak Shore, Brynja's friend, murdered by Bren's own hand. The nightmares hadn't stopped since he drove that blade into the man's chest. Darkness constantly closed in around him. He felt as if he was being watched at all times, and he swore sometimes he caught the glimpse of a second shadow trailing behind him. A reflection of his own. Bren took a deep breath, forcing himself out of his thoughts. He didn't need to spiral right now. Diniv stared at him from across the alley, a look of concern in his eyes.
You alright, lad?
No.
Bren whispered. Diniv was silent for a few moments before finally speaking again.
That makes two of us, I guess.
They both sat there in the alley for some time, sharing in their quiet suffering, each unknown to the other. Eventually, the sound of conversation close to the alley caught Bren's attention. He peeked around the corner and saw two of the Northgate guard conversing casually as they took their midday break, pipes in hand.
Can't believe those fools in Delot let something like that slide.
One said.
Come on. You know the dockmaster down there is crooked. He'd let anything go for a handful of coins.
The other replied. The first started.
But a whole damn warship? Can't imagine how they were surprised when the crew turned on them after the dockmaster came to collect the repair fees.
Hey, those people didn't deserve to die.
The second shot back.
They might not have died if they realized they were dealing with the lowlives that burned down Bleakshore.
The first spat before pausing.
You're right, of course. Sorry. Guess I'm just on edge. What if some of them slipped off the ship and made their way here? They could just be waiting to strike at any moment.
The second nodded.
Well, if you want to do right by those guards, we best keep an eye out, huh?
Bren ducked back into the alley. It seemed it was time to go. Hastily, he started gathering what little belongings he had, packing them all into his torn pack.
Where are you off to, lad?
Deniv inquired.
I am sorry, Deniv. This is goodbye. I don't think I can stay here anymore.
Bren replied. Deniv nodded.
You seem like the wandering type. I figured from the start you weren't going to be here too long. Any clue where you're heading next?
Bren shrugged.
I don't know, honestly. It's not safe for me in the northern holds any longer.
South, then.
Deniv suggested.
If you can slip across the border unseen, you should be able to disappear. For a while.
Bren thought for a moment before nodding his head in agreement. He bundled up the blankets and turned to Deniv, proffering them in his free hand. Deniv shook his head.
Keep the blankets, lad.
Thank you, Deniv. I hope to see you again. One day.
Bren said, a slight waver in his voice. He extended his hand to Deniv. The man shook it, meeting Bren's eyes. With that, Bren turned and left his friend in the alley. He skirted around the corner, being sure to stay out of the guard's view as he began to make his way towards the city gates. He walked for some time, the day passing by before eventually the sun began to set as he made his way out of Northgate and onto the plateau that overlooked the rest of the hold. Bren paused to take in the sights for a moment, before turning to continue down the path. He froze in place as he saw his shadow. No, his shadows. There were two of them, clear as day. They were both his shape, but the second was more disturbing of the two, for it was facing the wrong way. He swore he heard a soft laugh in the distance, followed by a whisper that put him in a cold sweat, its odd rhythm like nails on a chalkboard in his mind.
Hello, Bryn.